So the organisers of the conference here, importantly, have curated this panel to not be a sell. Carbon's such a contested area, and we've had a few red flags about greenwashing. It's so important to be able to know who to trust here, and indeed that has been a key theme of this conference. So in keeping with that theme, that this is a room of peers sharing amongst each other, that's the way this has been organised. We've got 40 minutes for it now, roughly split in two between the two speakers and a bit of a yarn together. So I'm going to hand over the reins as facilitator for this one to Michelle McManus. If you do an Ecosia search on Michelle, I don't know if you know this, Michelle. Do you know this? If you do an Ecosia search on Michelle, you're likely to find a Scottish singer. Yes. There we go, she does know. She's done a search on herself. Who won the UK talent show Pop Idol. I can tell you, that's not this Michelle, but part of me wonders if it might have been in another life, sliding doors. Michelle is a first-gen farmer here in the southwest and self-described trainee grass and soil steward. She wears many related hats, including her current role as head of sustainability for the Landsmith collection. Never comes out easily, I don't know if it does for you. Whose business portfolio includes Voyager Estate and Landsmith Home Farm, an early-stage regen farming beef and market garden project. Michelle also co-founded Pastured Poultry Farm Southampton Homestead near Balenup with her husband Jeff Powell nearly 10 years ago. We'll hear from Jeff later today, but for now, to host this, please welcome Michelle McManus.
Thank you. Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Louise, for setting that up. So I was going to do a quick bit of scene setting, but you've done it. We do need real reductions. And I'm going to quote you, AJ. Yesterday you said, it's the cycling and not the sequestration. And so we hold all of that for this next session, but we are zooming in a little bit and taking a very project and local focus. And spoiler alert, the question, is it a pathway to help finance the work, is not going to be answered in this 40-minute session. But hopefully we unpack it, maybe go to a few of the dark corners, not stay there for very long. I won't speak for too much longer so we can hear from our speakers. So I'm going to introduce them and they'll come up one at a time and then we'll all jump and have a yarn. I've actually got a few questions for the audience, so hopefully a few of you will be up for answering some questions so we harvest a bit of the wisdom in this room, and then hopefully we'll have time for at least one or two questions if there's a few burning questions, but make sure you do come and speak to the guys afterwards. So, Lachy Ritchie is going to be our first speaker. Lachy will be familiar to a lot of people. He's worked very broadly across the industry, including carbon farming, biodiversity offsetting and managing regenerative farmland. In 2018, he co-founded Regen Farming News, and in 2020 was part of the team setting up the Carbon Farming Foundation, which works with farmers on a range of education and outreach programs, and is talking today about Carbon Scout, which is an assessment tool I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about. And our second speaker, Brett Hazelden, comes to us from 25 years in the mining industry and purchased Blackwood River Farm a few years ago, and sounds like probably a lot of people in this room. He goes on some deep dives from what I can read and hear, and went down the regenerative farming path, right down there, and is the second soil carbon project, if I'm right, to be set up in Western Australia. So Brett's going to share a bit of his, Southwestern Australia. So Brett's going to share a bit of his experience. So I'd like to welcome Lachy first.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, I'm on a tight time limit, so I better rip into it. So Carbon Farming Foundation, we're a local charity based here in Margaret River. We work all across the country, and we've been working really hard the last 3 years to accelerate the adoption of carbon farming through a range of different initiatives. Now, it's important in the context of this conference just to acknowledge that we see carbon markets as a tool in the toolkit. They are there and they may be possible to be utilised within your context and within your situation. Today I'm talking about Carbon Scout, which is one of our new initiatives. Now, we started with this challenge of basically how do we rapidly increase the number of hectares being assessed for carbon across the country, knowing that carbon projects don't work everywhere, so let's assess as much land as possible as quickly as possible was the goal. Now, if you look at the problem from a landowner perspective, there was really just this basic, how the heck does this whole thing work, was one of the challenges. Another challenge is this financially viable for me in my context on my farm? And then who can I talk to about this? And there's definitely a barrier out there potentially in the industry around trust, and how do we trust who we're talking to, that we're getting the right information. And then really what it boils down to is that knowledge about carbon farming equals confidence, which means people can make informed decisions that are right for them. So our solution was basically to build an unbiased economic feasibility tool to allow farmers to quickly assess the opportunity on their land, and really to understand the business case and get there very fast at a low cost. Important to note as well that it is compliant with Australian financial services laws. So carbon credits are a financial product, and there's a whole bunch of rules around people giving you advice around carbon credits. So it does comply with those sort of hoops that you've got to jump through from a red tape perspective. It allows you to map yields and identify the best pockets of land, and also to compare your options from different carbon service providers. So let's get a look at it. So what you can do, you can jump on, you can draw your farm in, and basically you can whack, you'll see the little pink dots on the map. You can put little dots anywhere you like in the country, and the system will send off a query to FullCAM. So those not familiar with the jargon, FullCAM is the government's full carbon accounting model. And when it comes to a reforestation project and some other types of carbon projects, you're basically paid what the government model tells you, as long as you are compliant with the rule book. So that's the short, simple version of the story, and probably all I have time for today. But you can also draw plots on your farm, and what this system will do is it'll tell you straight away what your carbon yield potential is on that pocket of land. Now, we can also produce a carbon heat map over a farm to get a look at this visually. Now, all we've done here is we whack a whole bunch of points 200 metres apart in a grid pattern over the whole farm. We send all those points to FullCAM, get the carbon yield back, and then put it into a map like this so you can see how it looks across your farm. Now, I'll put this into a bit more context later, but you get the point. Now, what we're looking at here is environmental plantings. So we're talking biodiverse tree plantings. We can do this for plantation forestry and other types as well. Well, soon is the caveat. We can also do this over huge land regions, so you can get a sense of how this looks from a big picture helicopter view over the whole state or region. This is probably more useful for government or land care groups or other groups that are thinking about landscape scale interventions, basically as to where the hotspots are and the opportunities are for carbon farming. Now, what we do then is we walk through a step-by-step questionnaire of all the important factors that are going to be relevant to the economic potential of the project on your land. Now, what we don't want is that at the end of this process you come out thinking, I'm going to make exactly this much money, because that's not what this is about. So what we help you do is to set a sort of low, medium, high range of what might be possible in terms of all the costs, all the yields, all the different variables that influence the feasibility. So I won't run through the whole form, but you get a sense there that you can put different tree size, planting areas. You can use the map on the previous page to estimate your yield potential and all that sort of thing. We can put in the timing of when you want to get your carbon credits, how many issuances you want, how far apart you want them to be, whole bunch of things. There's a whole lot of questions. Little question mark bubbles that you can whack, click the little question mark up the top right, and it'll come up with an explanation, links to resources, help you understand what the variable is that you're talking about. Now, I better keep cracking. What you end up getting to is basically a dashboard that looks at the economic potential of your the opportunity on your land. Now, before where you set your low, medium, highs, you can now sit there and toggle and play around and create yourself different scenarios to get a sense of what works for you. So in this example, I've kept most of the variables the same. We're just looking at a small project with low yield, medium project, medium yield, large project, high yield, and you can see the difference. Usually this bottom line's the most interesting one to me personally, which is what is it going to cost me to generate a carbon credit? Because what you do with that is up to you. You may not sell them, so this may not be about profit. Cash flow graphs can also be produced. Now, this is a bit clunky because we're just developing this into the software now, but what we also do is we've got a list of currently 35 carbon service providers across the country. There's at least 35, there's potentially more out there. And we've got a whole bunch of information about them. Do they take a percentage of the carbon credits? Do they share cost and risk? Do they work on a fee-for-service basis only? Are they Australian owned? A whole bunch of criteria. This spreadsheet stretches far out to the side there, and it just gives you the opportunity to look at all the service providers, narrow it down so you can talk to the ones that are most relevant to your context for the help that you might need, if you need help. It also produces a report, which is as much a guidebook about what you need to do to explore further feasibility. And it explains all the variables, all the risks, helps you really get under the hood and understand what you're getting yourself in for, because there are major risks and opportunities at play. Now it is compliant with the generic calculator rules around Australian Financial Services licensing, which I've mentioned. The ideal pathway for us here is to get this tool into the hands of land care groups, NRMs, agronomists, and people who can sit with landowners at the kitchen table and talk through this together. Simple pay-as-you-go model, so you can get in and start using the tool very cheaply, and for around about the cost of a ticket to this conference, you can get a full feasibility done. Reforestation by environmental plantings is live now, soil carbon in a week or two, and then plantation forestry is another method that's down the track. Worth noting, if you're in the southwest of Western Australia, this software is powering a program called Decision Tree, which is currently available if you're looking at plantation forestry projects in the southwest. Now, good, got time for this. I wanted to show you kind of how the rubber hits the road a little bit. So this is the Willamby project, and we're a minor partner in this project, so I'm not going to take all the credit for it. But it's a project in Perenjori on the edge of the wheat belt, and it's combining a soil carbon project with an environmental plantings project over 3,000, the whole farm's about 5,000 hectares, I believe. And so what you can see here is if you look at the heat map on the left-hand side of the screen over there. Now, if you're just trying to game this system for carbon and all you're about is carbon credits, you're going to look at the map, you're going to go, I'm going to zoom in on the hot zones, the red zones, and I'm just going to plant some giant blocks of carbon in the red. But it's missing the point. Like, this is an opportunity to use carbon as a tool to regenerate the whole farm. So what we've got here is you've got at least 40 metre wide shelter belts and wildlife corridors peppering the whole farm. This was big, huge 200 hectare plus paddock sizes that have now been trimmed down to enable better rotation of grazing. We're talking about moving what was back-to-back cropping with occasional set stock grazing into a system where we can now move livestock around. We have a pasture rotation of 4 years, followed by a cropping rotation every 3 or 4. A crop rotation may go in if the season makes it possible. Now, the other thing to note is we're connecting wildlife reserves. Either side of this farm is wildlife reserves. So we're able to cut through the farm and connect up with wildlife corridors. All the trees that are going in here, it's a rich biodiverse plantation, around 30 plus species of trees, overstory and understory shrubs going in. And the thing to note as well is that by doing this in this way, we're taking overall a very small area of the land out of production. So we should be able to maintain, if not increase, productive capacity of the land. So this planting of trees should not materially or negatively impact the land value of the property, which is an important consideration in a carbon project. Now, if you were to sell the carbon credits from the trees, big if, that we might discuss in a minute, currently biodiverse environmental planting carbon credits can sell for $60 to $70. That's the current kind of offers we're getting. Check for yourself, not financial advice. If you were to sell all the carbon credits from the trees, it would fully fund this sort of redesign and restructuring of the farm. It would pay for all the fencing, all the new water points and infrastructure that went in, and effectively fund all of that work. And then you've still got the soil carbon project, and more importantly, the productivity from the land, which is, I haven't even mentioned the benefits of shelter belts and windbreaks, which we all know that can bring such value to the production system itself. So this is an example of how, if done right, in the right context, carbon credits and carbon markets can help to fund the transition, but it's very contextual is sort of where I'll wrap up. Cool, that's it from me. Thank you.
It's a little bit strange for a mining guy to come up here and talk about a regeneration conference, but we did pick up this farm 3 years ago, so end of 2020. There's a little diamond in the rough, and we're busily transforming it, hopefully, into a nice Regen Ag farm, but also a carbon farm going forward. So what are we? We're actually small. Most of the guys that are looking at carbon and the big picture aren't interested in these small farms. We're 80 hectares. We've got 5 dams. We've got 2 dams that cover 5 hectares. There's about 70 hectares of paddocks. They're about 3.5 hectares each. We do rotational grazing. We've got a centre lane. And we've planted over 12,000 trees, reeds and also shrubs over the last 2 years, and we'll continue doing that with the local land care guys. So we are doing our bit there. You can see there's lots of waterways there. The dams then overflow into the Blackwood River itself. So we're actually having that dam filled up virtually every 5 days at the moment through winter. So we get a lot of water running through this area. So there's the registered projects from CER website. You can go click on those. You can zoom into what each of those are. Where that one at the bottom there, where we're pointing to, with a little sheep there, or it's actually a cow. So when we established our soil organic carbon sequestration project, big words, we actually chose 3 different purposes or new purposes, and you have to choose 1 out of 13, which I think is wrong. If you're putting carbon into the soil, it should just be you're putting carbon into the soil, but that's the way legislation works. So we're re-establishing or rejuvenating pastures, so we're putting multi-species mixes in. We're putting more legumes in, again through the multi-species mixes, and we're also doing more rotational grazing. And that's the basis there. How do you make carbon? The reality is you're just trying to stick roots deeper and deeper into the soils. That's the simple answer of it. And in doing that, you can't do it with annuals generally, because annuals are only going down about 100 mil. You need to really be getting roots down at least 300 mil, if not down to a metre, which is what you've heard from a lot of people doing these, speaking up the last couple of days. So we've got more perennials going in, more legumes, we've got multi-species mixes, we've got the obligatory radish sitting there as well, not quite as good as some of the other radishes that we've seen today, but anyway, we won't compare sizes here. And we've also increased our stocking rates. So when we took over the farm, we had about 300 lambs with a couple of cows on there. We got up to over 1,300 ewes last year, which was well overstocked, but that's another story, plus 700 lambs. We're back to about 600 ewes at the moment, and accordingly, the lambs as they drop. So when you do one of these projects, you've got to nominate a carbon estimation area. You can have lots of carbon estimation areas if you wanted to. Ours is just a single one, which is the farm itself. But you then need to break it up into 3 different stratas. And we've broken it up into 4 different stratas here. You'll see the different colours. Blue area on the right-hand side there is the hill. Then you've got a really dark blue area, which is our waterlogging wet areas. We've got a hay and silage area, and we have an irrigation area. You've got to put at least 3 cores into each of those areas. That's legislation. We've put 34 cores across there in conjunction with that, 6 to 14 in each. So we've tried to do more detail to start with, and then we can pull that back as we go. We've done assays, or effectively looked at the carbon levels in the first top 30 centimetres, and then also the sub 30 centimetres down to a metre. We've also done some spectroscopy across all those intervals as well, effectively across the whole core, so we can understand the carbon variation as it goes down. That should also help decrease costs going forward. So there's a soil sampling rig, so that's Carbon West, Jennifer West. No plugs here, not allowed to, but that's the rig that we've done. You can see on the left-hand or the right-hand side there, it's a push tube. The tube takes a metre core sample. It's capped at one end, capped at the other end, heads off to lab, gets assayed, and also gets scanned as well. There's new technology that's coming out that's looking like probes that you can push down and actually do it all in one probe, and off you go. So we'll do that every 3 to 5 years, or 2 to 3 years, and go from there. So what do those results tell us? So on the right-hand side is our actual results, so you can ignore the table to start with. The green stuff on the right-hand side is our top 30 centimetres. We averaged 1.99% soil organic carbon in that top 30 centimetre intervals. Relatively uniform in grand scheme of things, some high, some low, and that will reflect those different strata areas in those different red-blue colours that I put up before. And then below 30 centimetres there is 0.5% carbon, of soil carbon. So there's not much there. There's a lot of upside there if you can actually get those levels up. Now let's look at the table. So we've got 70 hectares, say, it was round numbers, that's in this area. The estimated soil carbon when we put the project in, before we even knew that we had 1.99%, I thought we're going to be averaging 1.9%. So we got pretty well spot on. So we've got a couple of targets there in the next 3 columns. So if you look at most of the guys that are presented around here, they've compared conventional versus regenerative ag farms. Most of the soil carbons for Regen Ag farms are getting between 3 to 6%. Niels Olsen himself with Soil Key is now up to 10% on his and starting to kick up higher. So if you then run through those numbers there, if we go from 1.9% to 3.8%, that's a 1.9% increase. So that's the green lines there, 3.1, etc. Over 25 years, there's the equivalent carbon dioxide equivalents in terms of how many you would actually get, which is equal to that average annual. And then that green row there, you actually have to take a 25% discount because you're not guaranteeing that you're going to put it in there for 100 years. So we're only going to put it in there for 25 years, which is long enough. Most people don't even stay married that long. If we look at ACCU prices, $35 per year, or $35 per ACCU, there's the per year incomes that we might make, somewhere between $21,000 and $45,000 per year. Again, not disclaimer, it's not commercial advice as all those. This is what we're looking at. These are our targets. Who knows? If we go on Niels Olsen's, we might be able to achieve more, but equally might not be able to achieve it at all. So over that period, you could make $1 million, or you could make $500,000, or you could make nothing. Now let's take that $5.99 to that green line there, $5.99 to $12.92. If you want to be carbon neutral, you can stick it into a couple of these calculators. So there's a PISC, so Primary Industries Climate Challenges Centre calculator that can do. That's what most of them go into. That's what it calculates out for my farm. I've stuck the numbers in there, how many ewes I've got, how much lime we're putting out there, etc. It turns out that most of the emissions are coming from cows or sheep burping. So the reality is you can't do much about that yet. There's obviously all the asparagops and seaweeds and all those type of things, and they might do decreases. But our net farm emissions is 286 tonne of CO2 per year. And if we go back to the previous slide, oops, wrong way. 5.99. So if you want to be carbon neutral, half of it's going to go straight out the door trying to be carbon neutral. You'll get issued an ACCU. You'll want to actually then, if you want to be carbon neutral, retire one of those ACCUs, or you can sell the rest to yourself. So there's a whole heap of different things there that go in there. So some useful links here. There's a whole heap of calculators. There's carbon energy regulator stuff. There's Google Earth maps. The DPERD's got a lot of mapping that's already there that you can go and map these things yourself, figure out where the wet areas are, figure out where the different soil types are. Lots of good stuff. You can do your baselines yourself. There's a register of auditors. I had to call around a few auditors until I found a decent one. I found one in WA finally, and they look good. They've come out and had a good chat with us as well. What did it cost us, which is what the most interest is. So small farm, we don't have to do too many cores. Land management strategy, I've done most of it myself with the assistance from Carbon West as well. We've had the agronomist sit there and sign off, so you actually need an agronomist to sign off on it. You can't sign off on it yourself, even though you're the farm manager, go figure. Accountants and legals, they shouldn't cost you too much. If you're doing it yourself. We sampled 34 holes, it cost us $5,000, lab testing was $6,500. There's carbon mapping, so once we've got all those results back, we now need to map it across the farm. You'll see those various heat maps that Lachy put up before. That will obviously come out, and then we'll do our baselines emissions, and we do it ourselves type things. In terms of the reporting and crediting, I haven't got down to those costs yet. I'm hoping it's not going to be more than $10,000 by the time we go through that whole process. But an auditor, if you have to bring an East Coast auditor across, it's going to cost $25,000. They have to be accredited per the CER levels. We've managed to get him down to $10,000 for that. And we need to do soil sampling at least every 5 years and report at least every 5 years if we want to do it. There's a whole heap of considerations, whether you want to do it yourself or whether you want to go jump into bed with some of the bigger guys that will do it all for you. I'm not going to go through all of those. Some it was really a personal choice. We're a small farm, we can only afford to do certain things. But the reality is, if you're going to sign up with some of the big guys, they want to take 25% of your carbon credits, which is fine, they're doing a lot of work, but equally they're locking you into a contract. That contract, just read the T's and C's, and whether you can sell your farm, what you can do on your farm, etc., etc. So I did look at both options, and I concluded it's better off me doing it myself. Might be different for lots of other people. Let's have a look at the farm. So this is the farm when we bought it, December 2020. Last rain was 20th of November 2020. We had 935 mil of rain. There's the distribution across it. So it's pretty dry. Here's December 2021, so it's actually 2 weeks a little bit earlier. We had 1,200 mil of rain that year, so we had a lot of rain, but a similar distribution. Most of it came in June and July. Last rain finished in 22nd of November. Notice we've got a bit of green there. Changed the angle a little bit on this, and you've also seen our irrigation area, which is just about getting started now. So we've got 9.5 hectares of irrigation. Here's our hill, here's our wet areas. Those are the areas that we'll do the hay and silage from. Here was last year. So we put all the regen species in there. We've got some more perennials in there. We've actually stayed greener for longer. We only had 956 mil of rain. Last rain was on the 19th of November as well. It's very similar. So we're actually seeing some improvements. The hill itself, still sandy, dry soil, not working really well. That's it. I just decided to put those activities in there. There's the 13 different activities so people can look and figure out what you need to do differently, because you can only choose one of them, and it needs to be something new, otherwise you can't actually get a carbon project going. Thank you.
10 minutes of power. It's not an hour of power, it's 10 minutes. So thank you both, really interesting. We'll dive straight in with something that you said about, yes, there are risks and there are opportunities. So I'd like to get to you, but Brett, I'd like to ask you first, did you hesitate at any point, and what are some of the risks that you thought about and how you thought through those?
Testing. So the legislation's complex. I read lots, and I'm not too bad at reading. I can look at terms and conditions, I can go through the whole process. It's complex, it's not that simple. That said, once you get in there and actually start working through the detail, you can do it yourself. I managed to do it. I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's probably a lot of other people in the room that are smarter than us, but it's just a bureaucratic process. So yes, I did hesitate. I did look at other options and go, I'm too hard, throw my hands up. But the reality is, when we thought about the future and where the world's going, people are going to want their products to be carbon neutral. For us to be carbon neutral, the only way to do that is either buy an ACCU from someone else or do it ourselves. So we went down that path of, let's be at least carbon neutral. We're doing all these multi-species things. If we're doing a change now, we better grab the opportunity to actually get a registered project going, otherwise you miss that opportunity.
And in this safe audience, would you be willing to put a broad range estimate of how much time you yourself, as you say, it's a DIY with some help, is how you described it?
Yep.
It must have been a huge learning curve. Do you have a sense of... Yeah.
Look, it was a 9-month process from us looking into the detail through actually getting through and getting registered in the end, and also getting obviously help from other people. The reason it took that long isn't necessarily because it takes that long to do. It just, you need to actually go through the various steps, figure out what you need to do, how to grab it, and then find someone to talk to. And that was the hardest part. At the moment, there's not too many people that are registered, as you actually saw earlier, that you can actually go talk to. That isn't a big corporate or someone else trying to get a large percentage of your ACCU for the next 25 years.
Thank you. Lachy, did you want to add anything from your experience in terms of just risks and considerations, other than some of the assessment and those feasibilities of those? What else do people need to think about?
Yeah, sure. Testing, we're working? Yeah. Look, I think on the point of risk, it's like farming is about managing risk. Like farmers do it every single day, manage all sorts of risks. It's just about understanding what those risks are. So that was sort of the philosophy from our end, was just making sure all the risks are clear, they're up front, and you can get your head around them and then decide what to do. Probably the single biggest risk to look out for is the risk of reversal. So if you are paid, if you are issued carbon credits, so let's say year 5 you get a handful of carbon credits, and you go out and instantly sell all of those carbon credits, and then there is a fire or in the case of a soil carbon project, you have a drought and your carbon goes backwards. Now, there are mechanisms within the rules that give you a buffer to try and catch up and get back on track, and they're reasonable about it. But if at the end of the day the project does fail, you would have to give back those carbon credits. Now, if you've sold the carbon credits, you're going to have to go on the market and buy them. So that's probably the biggest risk that people need to understand. Now, it's pretty easy to manage. Hold on to your carbon credits. Most of the people we talk to about carbon projects see carbon credits as superannuation. They're sitting on them for a long period of time. They're banking at least the majority, if not all of the credits, and then they're going to slowly make a decision later about when they feel safe to sell some or use them for carbon neutrality. It's pretty easy to manage. The final one to add that's worth being conscious of is the impact of a carbon project on land valuations. So this is still a little bit of an unknown, but particularly with tree planting projects, as to how that is going to impact the value of the land. So it's just important to think about that. And you would have seen from the Willamby project that if you're taking a very small portion of the land, strategic locations, and you're maintaining productivity, that's one way to manage the risk that you're going to devalue the farm. So there's a whole bunch of things to consider, but it's just about knowledge.
Yep.
I'll just talk about risk as well. We do take the same view. It's a superannuation fund. We'll keep on banking it over time, but you get carbon credits effectively every 5 years. So the first time you can run the project for 5 years and then decide I'm going to back out. You can actually get issued credits after 10 years or whatever else, and you can still decide to back out, as per Lachy has said, but you've got to give back the ACCUs. So that's the catch. And if you want to sell your property, just be aware that you've got either an agreement with someone else or you've got a whole heap of carbon credits. They might not want to take on that carbon project going forward. And if you've sold that property, how do you reverse, obviously, what you've already done? So there's a consideration on risk as well, which is a big risk over a 25-year period.
Yep. Right at the end there, Brett, you were talking about the new and additional, and I sort of think it's interesting in a room like this, and maybe it's the way my simple brain works, and this might be an audience question if anyone's really excited to answer it, but there's there's different forms of leadership here, and I want to acknowledge that new leadership is still leadership, but there's also people that might have been doing this type of work for many, many years. I wonder what's available, and is there anything out there in terms of recognising that past work, that historical work? Is there any mechanism for that?
Not currently. There's a biodiversity legislation that's meant to be coming through that will help pick up some of the existing tree plantings in terms of if it's natures and all those. But if you've already started, you've already lost a lot of that opportunity. You've got to find something new, materially new as well. So it could be planting a whole heap of different legumes maybe, but you just got to get it through the regulator and get it approved being new or materially different.
It's an unfortunate part of the way the carbon market works is that someone who is paying for the carbon credit, they're paying for a new and what's called additional change, which is why they can't accredit historic activities under the carbon markets. There is something known as carbon insetting, which is a bit more of a complex area. Bit of misinformation and misunderstanding around how you would define it. But one of the things that we're seeing internationally is where they can come in and basically they'll look at the emissions happening within a farm operation. They'll look at what you're doing to reduce emissions, and they'll also take into account on-farm carbon removals, such as from trees, soil carbon projects. Now, within the context of carbon insetting, it may not need to be accredited under a carbon credit scheme. So there are some things at play, but we haven't really seen that happening here in Australia yet. It might come in some way, shape or form.
All right. Any burning comment from the audience around that one? Yes?
You've mentioned using ACCUs as a superannuation. Is an ACCU that is created in 2025 going to experience any time decay if you don't exercise your right to sell it by 2050?
Super good question. There's a bit going on in the industry at the moment around the notion of vintage of carbon credits. Vintage, same as a wine, it's the year that it was minted. Basically, they're calling that the vintage of the carbon credit. Now, in the way the current markets are playing out, at least internationally, is older vintages are seen as less valuable than current vintages. A little bit perverse, and it's in relation to the fact that there's an assumption that methodologies from 5 or 6 years ago weren't as rigorous as they are today. Now, whether that should be that way, I don't think it should be, and it's certainly moving forward now that the methodology is getting so rigorous. And I mean, you know, Terry will attest to the amount of auditing and everything that he had to go through to get those soil carbon credits. In theory, should be okay. The other thing you can do is you can lodge your offset reports and you don't have to get the credits issued that year. So they can sort of sit there with the regulator if you want them to. And so you can do a little bit of kind of timing of when your credits are issued to buffer against that. But it's probably a question for some of my team, not me, as to how you do that.
It's probably worth also noting an ACCU is like a share at the end of the day. It's a financial instrument. So suddenly you've been issued Commonwealth Bank shares. They go up and down. So the market might go up, might go down, might make you money, might make you nothing.
It's a great analogy. I think we've only got about 2 minutes left, so I might give the last word question from the audience, if there is another one. Terry?
It's a quick question around the carbon sequestration that's not credited. So under the Australian scheme, there's 25% effectively of what you're sequestering that doesn't turn into credits. As I'm wondering, with that 25%, how much of that can be used to class yourself as carbon neutral or negative?
Good question. I've never thought of it, to tell you the truth. I just thought it was gone because it's not classed as ACCU.
Yeah, I mean, interesting one. Like, I haven't thought about that specifically in relation to the buffer pools that are withheld. I mean, the quick kind of gut feel response to that, Terry, would be that the buffer pools are held there for uncertainty and to manage risk and uncertainty. And whether you're getting accredited for it and keeping the credits, risk and uncertainty remains. So I can't imagine them. It's not credited. Yeah.
Did you want to expand a bit more, Terry? Or? Yeah.
When you're looking at insetting, for example, I think that carbon that's been sequestered, that's not turned into credits, is still something that, and this is feedback from supply chains and banks, is that they may accept that contribution because it is actually CO2 drawn out of the atmosphere, it's just not credited. So I suspect that there'll be a chance, but it's out of the credit market. It's got to be somebody recognising that sequestration that's not a credit. So it means that any emitter in Australia can't use that as an offset, but a food chain might be able to. Something worth thinking about.
Very interesting, yeah. And a question of timing, you know, as to when that happens. Is it actually a real sequestration by the time it's that unaccredited carbon, do you know?
Well, it's real sequestration. It's just a discount on real sequestration.
Yeah,
if you're doing a 25-year project.
Yes.
25-year permanence period. So it's actually real sequestration, which is then just thrown away, taken off the top.
All right. 30 seconds, 10 seconds.
My suspicion on that one, Terry, is that especially when it comes to insetting and unaccredited insetting, is the greenwashing radar is going to be really, really high and people are going to be really worried that people are making a carbon neutral claim and then, you know, there's leakage or reversal events later. So I think they'll have the same level of concern, therefore the same buffers will apply. That's my hunch on it anyway. Yeah, but who knows?
To be continued. That's a, yeah. Oh, take a few more questions. We've got a few more minutes. Lovely. Yep, over here.
Mel from Rocky Ridge again. We operate carbon neutrally, which we buy at ACCU. So if you're willing to ever separate with your superannuation, I'd love to buy yours at $35 a pop because I pay a hell of a lot more than that. But we're starting to see a shift in a lot of, particularly on a global scale, of breweries that are carbon neutral. They're working towards buying accreditation that's more along the UN Sustainable Development Goals, not so much carbon. Do you see that moving across in Australia as well? In particular, it's a way that they're actually combining farming activities and carbon activities with more sustainable development goals around community to provide that insurance. So it's sort of mixing different avenues that you can offset the good that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I think, to me, carbon's just the starting point, and it's measurable, it's monetisable now, and it's where we're starting. But I think we are going to see the emergence of broader ecosystem markets, and that will stretch to Sustainable Development Goals community. The starting point, at least for that, is going to be if you've got a base carbon credit. I almost see it as like if you put a grass-fed stamp on it or an organic stamp on it, you might put a Sustainable Development Goal stamp on it, or some other. Do you know what I mean? You layer other activities on top that'll make that carbon credit worth more money. Does that answer the question? That's sort of where I see it starting.
Yeah, I guess it's more, do you see that being a monetary value, or do you see it being just another layer?
At the moment, at least initially, I would see it not being tradable in its own right. I would see it more likely stapling or attaching to a carbon credit, but that's just personal position. Who knows where it'll go?
Okay, we had a question down here.
Thank you. Great presentations. I'm curious about scalability in the sense of how small properties can be and still be engaged with these sorts of schemes. And if you know of anyone that's doing sort of cooperative kind of models for smaller properties. And also curious about the backdating of carbon projects in the sense of looking at the trees that people have planted. And if anyone's working towards being able to get carbon credits for that past work rather than just new projects.
I'll start with the backdating one. Super tricky because people are paying for additionality. They're paying for new carbon drawdown. So the theory is if you're someone who's buying a carbon credit, you don't want to pay for something that's already happened. It's a constant cause of difficulty and for people to get their heads around. Some international methods allow a small period of backdating, so maybe 5 years, if you can prove that the reason you planted the trees in the first place was to get the carbon credit. So, look, to be honest, there's a whole lot of this nuance and difficult and challenge that means carbon credits aren't always the way to go. In a small farming context, I had a really good chat with Rowan earlier on, just talking about that in a small farm context especially, there are a whole lot of other reasons to plant trees. Like, you just got to have a really good think. Do you need the carbon credit? Do you need that long-term liability? Is it necessary for you in your context? And the answer may be no, there are other things, other reasons to plant trees. Just on the group projects, the only way, like carbon credit projects have costs involved. There's auditing, there's reporting, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And like anything, there's economies of scale advantages. So what it means, what we see is really if you're doing a tree planting project less than 100 hectares or 200 hectares, it's probably not worth it for carbon. But one idea we're exploring at the moment, and we'd love to chat to anyone who's keen, is the potential to register. What you can do is register a carbon project, say over the entire Cape to Cape region here, and then enrol a bunch of small plantings into one aggregated project altogether, and then you share the risks and rewards and costs of that. So there are people that do that. There are carbon project service providers that will enrol you into a bigger project. It's called aggregation, and it is possible. Yeah.
Something to follow up. Pam, is this final question? Yep.
Thank you. We're not really, and it's maybe the stage we're at in our farming lives, not particularly concerned about ACCUs, but we are concerned about whether, for example, our grazing management is going to increase the carbon in our soils. And what we want to do, and we've started talking to people about it, is get an assessment done of the carbon across our total of 250 acres. So it's not a big property, and it's in 2 bits. Just to get a carbon assessment and then see if in 2 or 3 years our grazing management has made any difference to the carbon content of the soil. Is that a worthwhile project to do?
Look, we're not too much bigger. The only reason we're going down the ACCUs path is to be carbon neutral and be able to offset it. But I would also say that you don't necessarily have to be offsetting your things at the moment, obviously your carbon credits or your carbon consumption. You might have a different organisation that will accredit you as sustainable or whatever else going forward. That there's obviously been lots coming up. And I think that might be an alternative to actually going down the ACCU pathway and having to deal with all those just being registered or audited as sustainable. But you need a baseline and you need something to compare it against.
Yeah, so if we do the baseline, just for our own interest, yes, it will cost.
Yep.
And then just for our own interest, and then is that information of any value to perhaps a buyer down the road?
You're asking if later on you can then almost convert, or that can become a project later on. But I think what I heard earlier was almost like you've sort of got to start very clearly with that intent. And be like it's sort of all in, is what I'm hearing a little bit from the start.
You've actually got to get in there and be all in from the start. Otherwise, you've got no...
But you're all in as far as just getting an assessment done in your property.
Yeah. So I'd say on that one, like, if getting more carbon flowing in an agricultural system is a good thing. Whether it's coming from trees, soil carbon, however you're doing it, it's a good thing. And if you're trying to get all the value from that, measuring it to know what's going on is super important. The difficulty is if you're trying to layer in and later get carbon credits, you could if you do a new activity later. So you can measure, learn, do better, and then you go, oh, I do want to get involved in a carbon project now. The gains you've had to date won't be counted. But if from the date you decide you are going to get involved, you get a formal baseline done, you implement a new and materially different activity, your gains start from there on out. Or do it in one paddock, test that it's possible, and then apply the carbon project over the remainder of your land. Take that activity that you've proven works and roll it out across the rest of the property. So there's ways to do it, but if a carbon project's right for you.
The Clean Energy Regulator won't actually accept a baseline until you're a registered project. So if you did a baseline before it, it's bad luck.
It answers the question.
And
Thanks,
the baseline process is really silly, and the way they actually then make you can't just go drill a hole wherever you want. They actually have a certain methodology where they're randomly generated. It makes no sense to me, being a mining guy and having to put in resources and all this. You do it in grids. These things, you'll have 3 or 4 holes in one spot, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever come across.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Lachy. Yeah, great stuff.